tonight, we're fortunate to have a sophomore from Mather House, Nika Rodenko, who is studying integrated biology, who is from Ukraine. We've asked her to say some words of reflection.
I'm originally from Donetsk, Ukraine, which means that in 2014, we were forced to flee my hometown, running from the danger, not knowing where, moving to the capital to find the asylums there. At that moment, my life changed forever. And 5 days ago, my life changed again. We need the support from the international community. We're strong, yet the enemy is strong as well. And I'm quite disappointed that the international community is not taking and needed required action right now. They're waiting for us to win this. They're standing aside, wishing for the best. They're fearing the Third World War. But what is the alternative? Just keep watching Ukrainian children and Ukrainian people dying?
I did want to take one last moment to reflect on what Mika said and to give her another round of applause for having the strength for everything she's doing and for helping us understand that from a personal perspective. Ash doesn't really know this, but I spent a little bit of time today and I went back in the archives and dug up old pictures of Ash Carter from the 90s. And we'll talk about some of the most important things as it relates to the history of Ukraine post-Soviet Union. And the first place I wanted to start is with a picture here of the Budapest Accord, which was signed on the 5th of December in 1994. Talk to us a little bit about this agreement with Budapest.
This was the agreement in which Boris Yeltsin, on behalf of the Russian Federation, said that Russia wouldn't do what it's actually doing right now, namely invade Ukraine, that it would respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. And though the agreement doesn't exactly phrase it that way, the quid pro quo, in essence, was that Ukraine would allow the nuclear weapons that were on its territory when the Soviet Union disintegrated to be eliminated. And that was, inter alia, my responsibility as an Assistant Secretary of Defense. I ran the Nunn-Lugar program in Ukraine. It does not pledge the United States to come to Ukraine's aid. We did make an assurance, which is simply saying that we respected the territorial integrity of Ukraine and would essentially take an interest in their security, but fell short of pledging to come to their aid. That's important at this moment because many people are looking at the terrible things that are going on in Ukraine, the absolutely unjustifiable invasion of a country, and as I'm sure we'll talk later, I foresee worse coming in the days ahead.
So you see here a picture of the silo of an intercontinental ballistic missile at the time, nuclear. There, if you look closely, you see a young Ash Carter. But talk a little bit, just very briefly, about how it was as an assistant secretary disposing of nuclear weapons in the former Soviet Union and in Ukraine in particular.
What you couldn't see in the picture that was just shown is we are standing above that silo, out of which the SS-24 has been lifted, and then we packed it with explosives and blew it to smithereens. And in that picture there, in that last picture, is the Ukrainian defense minister and the then Secretary of Defense, my then boss, Bill Perry. This is us in the following season. That was winter time. We blew up the silo. By springtime, I had removed the silo entirely, and we were planting crops. And we're planting sunflowers, actually, and this isn't some whimsical thing. That's a cash crop of that part of Ukraine. We're planting sunflowers there, and that's me in the far right in the Pentagon jacket, the blue blue jacket there, making sure that
Time you'll see Ash Carter not wearing
not in a suit. Yeah,
he was destroying nuclear missiles in Ukraine 25 years ago. Okay, so we're going to move ahead now. Crimea in February of 2014, when President Putin invaded Crimea.
we just jumped from 1995 to 2014. Who's still around? Vladimir Putin. Shortly, we're going to jump ahead to 2021. Who's still around? Vladimir Putin. Now, Putin didn't come to that particular meeting, but I was in meetings with Putin during that period of time. He would sit behind Boris Yeltsin and take notes. We knew who he was. For 25 years, this single individual has lived all of this history. The breakup of the USSR, the establishment of countries like Ukraine, something we didn't talk about, which is the Balkan Wars, where I negotiated with Russia the agreement according to which the Russians would work with NATO, even though they hated NATO, right on up to now. And how often is it in history that a single figure has that long to dwell upon grievances, to consolidate his authority? Another thing you're thinking about when you're thinking about history is what mix of great forces, impersonal forces, and individual personalities move the needle in history. This is a case where an individual personality is moving the needle, and he has the ability to do that because he's been around long enough to consolidate his power, and he has the obsession to do that because he remembers the slights, what he conceives of as the slights of the 1990s, our debates over NATO enlargement, which was the other big debate at that time, besides the nuclear one, with respect to NATO and Russia and Ukraine. I had my views about that one as well, but my views at that time were not heeded. I wanted NATO enlargement to go much more slowly than we did. And we in the Pentagon, myself, Bill Perry, John Shalikashvili, who's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, we wanted to slow the ball because we thought that this was going to get the phrase we used at the time was, we don't want to create a Weimar Russia, a Russia aggrieved at having lost the Cold War. That's exactly that's a perfect unpacking of the stated, you don't have to ask him what he thinks, the stated mindset of Vladimir Putin, aggrieved about the way the last war ended and determined that dishonor will be rectified.
You can see a relatively current map of the situation in Ukraine today. As you all know, a Russian convoy of at least, I think, up to 40 miles starting to envelop Kiev, horrible bombing of Kharkiv. I think 2,000 civilian casualties is the latest number just there, including a couple dozen young children. If someone asks you where you think Putin's going with this right now, what do you think?
I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, Eric. First of all, I don't think you can quite see the position he's in and not say to yourself, this couldn't have been the way he anticipated things going. I think he thought he was going to knock this over a lot faster. And by the way, there was a time when he could have done that. In fact, as recently as 2014, the Ukrainian state was less stable. Its armed forces were less capable than they are now. The Ukrainian people had not consolidated their identity in the same way that they have just in the last 7 years, and their determination to remain not only a independent country, but a Western-facing country. That was by no means good. Those days when I was in Ukraine, I think if you had asked any of those Ukrainian leaders I was dealing with which way they thought in 25 years Ukraine's fortunes would take it, they would have said towards Moscow. He may be able to take Kiev and install a puppet government. I don't think he's going to be able to subdue the entire country.
What we'd like to do now is offer you the opportunity to ask Secretary Carter questions.
I wondered if you had any advice on international financial institutions and their role in this rule-based order, but also any advice because you got a much more contested world. Thank you, sir.
Well, they have an outsized role in this crisis, and I the dollar, the ruble, the euro, whatever, can't stand apart anymore from political and military life. And so economic leaders have to step up with responsibility in their own way. And in that connection, I've been actually pleased to see the voluntary, in some cases voluntary, not compelled by sanctions, voluntary actions by companies and so forth to express their unwillingness to be, in a sense, a party to this thing. The era of globalization is over. This moment in political history, I think, will end up signifying that. That is the idea that we're all one world and we're, going to join hands, and that there's going to be a bloc deal that is Russia-oriented, and there's certainly a bloc that is China-oriented that is decided to secede from the political and economic system that we thought people would converge to after World War II, and then even more so at the end of the Cold War. That's not happening. I'm quite concerned about what's going to occur in coming days in Ukraine. And I think, your hearts have to be with this brave people. I spent a lot of time in Ukraine. I have lots of Ukrainian friends in all those years, many, many, many days, lots of wonderful times with the wonderful people. And it's heartbreaking to see this kind of violence be visited upon them. And, Russians are people like everyone else. They're not going to like to be associated with something as grotesque as this.
That seems like a great place to leave it. Ash, thank you. Y'all, the only last word I'd say is I think we should go back to where it all started, which is thinking about what Bika communicated to all of us, both her story and her 3 points. If there is something you can do to help, we ask you to do that. And to thank you all for making time for coming out tonight.